Hi, ninth grade students, here with the next installment of Into the Clouds. We're beginning on chapter 8, page 92, A Perfect Day to Summit. So I think you know what that means by now when it says a perfect day to summit. To summit means to make the climb, to reach the peak, to ascend to the summit, the top. The night of July 14th, a storm rolled in and shrouded the mountain. The wind whipped long, swirling tails of snow from the summit. Falling snow blanketed the tents in 4 tiny outposts strung along the mountainside and separated by thousands of feet of elevation. There, in varying states of deterioration, the remnants of Wisner's team waited out the storm. They had arrived together at the end of May. In 6 weeks, K2 had torn them apart. At the top of this broken chain of climbers stood Wisner, Wolf, and Pasang Lama. They had pitched a tent on a broad shoulder of snow, 25,300 feet, Camp 8. They were the highest men on earth, and Wisner was primed to go higher. He had supplies for several days, and he thought Durrance was recovering in Camp 6, directing 5 Sherpas to bring more. He had either ignored the signs that his expedition was crumbling below him or decided he didn't care. He was determined to push for the summit. Down the mountain, the rest of the team simply wanted to go home. At base camp, Cromwell, Sheldon, and Kramer counted the days until the porters arrived. Above them in Camp 2, Durrance tried to recover his strength while Kekule nursed his frozen feet. Another 4,000 feet up the mountain, Tindrup, Tsering, Pasang Katara, and Finsu huddled in the cramped tents of Camp 6. They had orders to carry more loads to the camps above them. But to get there, they had to negotiate the steep, broken rock of the Black Pyramid and the treacherous ice slopes below Camp 8. The Sherpas were climbing in boots similar to the ones Durrance had complained about during his first weeks on the mountain. They had no crampons and no Fritz Wisner to carve steps for them. Without a better equipped lead climber, they did not want to move. On July 17th, Wisner woke to clear skies and a light wind at Camp 8. There was no sign of Durrance or the Sherpas. Kekule, who he had hoped would be with him near the top, hadn't returned. And Wolf was finally showing signs of wear. But the summit stood just 3,000 feet overhead. 2 days of climbing, and Wisner could be the first man to stand astride one of the coveted 8,000-meter peaks. Pasang Lama had been climbing as well as anyone on the mountain. Wisner decided to make do with the climbing party he had. That morning, Wisner, Wolf, and Lama roped up and slogged up the slope through soft, fresh snow. After a couple hours of extreme effort, they stood at the lip of a crevasse, a long crack in the ice field that blocked their way to the summit cone. Crevasses are a sneaky hazard for high-altitude climbers. They often fill with snow from storms or avalanches. The snow offers a tempting bridge across the crevasse, but each step is a gamble. No one knows what lies below. An awkward 6-foot drop and a scramble back to the top, or a 100-foot plunge into darkness. With Lama anchoring him at the edge of the crevasse, Wisner stepped onto the snow bridge. He sank immediately to his hips. As carefully as he could, he waded through the snow. When he finally hauled himself over the lip of the crevasse, he dug a firm belay position to the slope and helped Lama across. The 2 men now turned to encourage Dudley Wolf. Wolf plunged into Wisner's tracks, but every step was a struggle. He felt like he was swimming in quicksand and sinking deeper with every moment. He could probably keep fighting, but suppose he made it to the other side. The climbing would only get harder, the air thinner. Through sheer force of will, he had outlasted everyone on the expedition except Pasang Lama and great Fritz Wiesner. Now, he had finally reached the end of his strength. So this is a photograph and then a drawing of their ascent. "It's hopeless, Fritz," he called across the crevasse. "I just can't make it." Will fought his way back out of the crevasse. He told Wiesner he would go back to Camp 8 and recover. When Tentrup and Pasang Qatar arrived with supplies, maybe he would try again. He reached to his waist and untied the rope that bound him to Lama and Wiesner. He let the rope drop, located the tracks they had made on the way out of camp, and headed down the mountain. One by one, the members of the Second American Karakoram expedition had dropped away. The team had failed to give Wiesner the support he wanted. Pasang Lama was not the partner he had expected to be left with at this point in the climb. And yet, here they stood, 3,000 vertical feet from the top of K2. One more camp and the summit would lie within reach. This was the moment Wiesner had been fighting for. The weather looked promising. Most of the mountain lay below them. Wiesner and Pasang Lama turned toward the summit of K2 and climbed. A mile and a half down the mountain, Jack Durrance was lounging in the sun at Camp 2 when Dawa bounded into view with a note from Cromwell at base camp. The porters were arriving in less than a week, and Cromwell was collecting gear for them to haul off the mountain. He wanted Durrance to strip the lower camps and bring loads down with him. "Salvage all the tents and sleeping bags you can," the note said. Durrance grumbled about the order to his diary. "Easier said than done," he wrote. After 3 days of rest, he felt like he had rejoined the world of the living. But that didn't mean he was ready to haul 50-pound loads around at 19,000 feet. He had lost nearly 30 pounds since he left New Hampshire. In the Rockies, below 15,000 feet, he could cope with exhaustion. He could use every ounce of his strength one day, get a good night's sleep, then get up and do it again. In the Himalayas, it didn't work that way. On K2, you never recovered. Kekuli was still in danger of losing his toes to frostbite, but he had been feeling torn between his own safety and his duties as head Sherpa. He agreed to take Dawa, climb the loose rock slopes to 4, and strip the camp. They returned with 70-pound loads of sleeping bags, tents, and other supplies. The next day, Durrance roused himself enough to join them. The 3 men trudged down to base camp, burdened with supplies. Besides complaining about the effort it required, Durrance did not question the order from Cromwell. Both of them knew that the high camps were still well supplied, and when the summit party came through, they would probably have their own sleeping bags. From below House's chimney, they should be able to make base camp in a day. Still, it had been Wiesner's plan to make sure all camps were stocked. They had expended a tremendous amount of effort hauling loads up the Abruzzi Ridge. The 5 camps above them had taken more than 5 weeks to supply. Now the mountain lay nearly empty for 7,000 feet above base camp. On July 19th, when Fritz Wiesner emerged from his tent at Camp 9, he had no idea what was happening on the mountain below him. He knew only that the skies were clear and the wind calm. It was a perfect day to summit K2. At 9:00 a.m., he and Pasang Lama shouldered light loads and got underway. It was a late start for a summit push, and some of the hardest climbing on the mountain lay ahead. Before long, they stopped to catch their breath. They leaned on their ice axes and stared up at K2's last obstacle, a giant overhanging cliff of snow and ice called a Serac, which guards the final climb to the top. From below, Weisner could see two possible routes, and neither looked good. Just beneath the serac lay a narrow corridor of ice, as steep as anything they'd climbed. If they chose that route, they'd have to carve steps upward and to the left in the shadow of the overhang. There were few places to anchor a rope. If one of them slipped, the other would be helpless to stop the fall. For 300 feet, they would have to move at a snail's pace with several tons of ice hanging over their heads. At any moment, a stray chunk could give way to gravity, break loose, and sweep them off the slope. The second route lay farther to the left, out of reach of the serac, but it posed another challenge. Between the two climbers and the easy snow slopes of the summit stood a couple hundred vertical feet of steep rock, glazed with ice. At sea level, the climb would demand great strength and skill. At 27,000 feet, it was nearly impossible. Most climbers would have rejected the route immediately. Fritz Weisner was not like most climbers. Always more comfortable on rock than ice, Weisner chose the second route. He removed his crampons to get a better purchase on the rock. Then for 9 hours, he led Llama through some of the most difficult high-altitude climbing anyone has ever attempted. Risking frostbite, he took off his gloves so he could feel the rock beneath his fingers. He powered his way up an icy overhang. For 2 more rope lengths, he worked the rock face while Llama belayed him from below. When the rope went taut, he anchored himself with a python, wrapped the rope around his hips, and helped Llama up the route. At around 6:00 p.m., Weisner clung to the rock just below the top of the cliff face. One more 25-foot traverse, and he would pull himself onto the gradual snow slopes that led to the summit. From there, it was just a 3 or 4 hour long slog through the snow to the top of K2. Finally, the goal he'd been dreaming of for years lay within his grasp. Let's stop there. At the top of page 102. Can't wait to read the next little bit. Thank you so much, 9th grade students. Hope you have a great evening and hope you're taking care of yourselves. Bye.